My husband said, "My ex is coming to Christmas dinner with us." He had no idea what was coming next. Like, share, and subscribe to Voices of Auntie Belle. We absolutely love hearing from you all. Where are you watching from today? Drop a comment and let us know. Now, let me tell you what happened next. The living room smelled like cinnamon and pine. Outside, snow fell so thick and heavy that the world looked like it had been wrapped in white cotton. Inside, our Christmas tree stood tall and proud, covered in golden lights that twinkled like 1,000 tiny stars. I had spent the whole day decorating it, hanging ornaments one by one, thinking about how beautiful this Christmas would be. 5 years of Christmases with Daniel, and I thought this one would be the best yet. I was in the kitchen making hot chocolate when Daniel walked in. He looked nervous, which was strange because Daniel was never nervous about anything. He was the kind of man who always knew exactly what to say and when to say it. He pulled out a stool at the kitchen counter and sat down slowly, like the chair might break underneath him. I poured the hot chocolate into 2 mugs and pushed one toward him. Steam rose up between us like a wall. I remember thinking that something about the way he was sitting didn't feel right. There was something heavy in the air, something I couldn't quite name. "Alina," he said, and he said my name in a way that made my stomach drop. When someone says your name like that, in that particular voice, you know that what comes next won't be good. You just know it. "Yes?" I asked, trying to sound normal even though my heart had started beating faster. "I need to tell you something about Christmas dinner tomorrow," he said. He looked into his hot chocolate like the answer to his problems might be floating in the marshmallows. I waited. I didn't say anything. I just waited because I've learned that when someone has something hard to say, silence is sometimes the kindest thing you can give them. It gives them room to speak. "Sophie is coming," he said finally. Just like that. Just 4 words that changed everything. Sophie. His ex Sophie, who he had dated before me. Sophie, who I had heard stories about but never met. Sophie, who existed in my mind as just a name and a face in old photographs. Sophie was coming to our Christmas dinner. I set down my mug very carefully. I didn't trust my hands. My hands wanted to shake, and I didn't want Daniel to see them shake because I didn't want him to know that those 4 words had just knocked the ground out from under me. "Why?" I asked. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, like it was coming from very far away. "Because she's alone," Daniel said. "She doesn't have anywhere to go for Christmas. Her family moved overseas, and she's staying here by herself in an apartment with no decorations and no one to spend the day with. I couldn't just leave her alone on Christmas, Alina. I couldn't do that to her." I looked at my husband. I looked at his face, which I had kissed every morning for 5 years. I looked at his eyes, which I thought I knew better than I knew my own face. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. Something small and quiet, but definite. It was like a door closing somewhere deep inside my chest. "You couldn't just leave her alone," I repeated. The words tasted strange in my mouth. "But you could leave me wondering who you're suddenly so concerned about?" "It's not like that," Daniel said quickly. Too quickly. Like he had practiced what he would say if I asked that exact question. "She's just an old friend." I felt bad for her. That's all. But that wasn't the whole story, was it? I didn't know that yet. I didn't know about the locked phone. I didn't know about the secret messages that were being typed out in the middle of the night. I didn't know about the second phone that he kept hidden in his office, tucked behind a stack of old work documents. I didn't know any of it yet. All I knew in that moment was that something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. "I need to think about this," I said. I stood up and walked away from the kitchen counter, away from the steam rising from the hot chocolate, away from my husband sitting on that stool with his nervous hands and his careful explanations. That night, I lay in bed next to Daniel, and he fell asleep almost immediately. He always did. He had the gift of being able to close his eyes and slip away into dreams within minutes. But I stayed awake. I lay there in the darkness, listening to him breathe, listening to the wind outside rattling the windows, listening to the sound of my own thoughts racing through my head like a train that wouldn't stop. 5 years. We had been married for 5 years. We had built a life together. We had routines and rhythms. We had inside jokes and shared memories. We had created something that I thought was real and solid and true. And now, in the darkness of our bedroom, with the Christmas tree glowing softly through the open door, I wondered if any of it had ever been real at all. The snow kept falling outside. The world kept getting covered in white. And inside, in our beautiful home with its cinnamon smell and golden lights, something very important was starting to crack. I could feel it. I could feel the fracture beginning, small and thin, like the first line in glass before the whole thing shatters. I didn't sleep that night. Not 1 minute. And I knew, with a certainty that felt like ice water in my veins, that nothing would ever be the same again after this Christmas. The question was whether that would be the worst thing that ever happened to me, or whether it might somehow be the best thing. That question would not be answered for several more days. Christmas morning came whether I was ready for it or not. The sun rose over the snow-covered landscape, turning everything silver and blue. I had finally fallen asleep around 5 in the morning, just as the sky was beginning to lighten. It felt like only minutes later when Daniel was shaking my shoulder gently, whispering that it was time to get up. I didn't want to get up. I wanted to stay in bed where nothing was real and nothing hurt, and I didn't have to think about Sophie sitting at my dinner table. But I got up anyway because that's what I do. I get up. I put on my face and my clothes and I do the things I'm supposed to do. Breakfast was quiet. We opened presents. Daniel gave me a beautiful scarf, soft blue like the winter sky. I gave him a watch he had mentioned wanting. We smiled at each other, but the smiles felt like we were both acting in a play. We were playing the roles of a happy married couple on Christmas morning, and we were both very good actors. It was around noon when I first noticed something was truly wrong. Daniel's phone buzzed. He looked at it, and his whole body seemed to tense up. He stood up quickly and walked into the other room. I could hear him moving around in his office, opening drawers, closing them quietly. When he came back, he said he had to run to the store to pick up something he had forgotten for dinner. He said this very casually, the way you say normal things, but his jaw was tight and his eyes wouldn't quite meet mine. "What did you forget?" I asked. "Cranberry sauce," he said. "I thought we had some, but we don't." "Daniel, I made cranberry sauce yesterday. It's in the refrigerator in a blue container." He blinked. For just a second, he looked confused, like he had genuinely forgotten that I had told him this. Or maybe he was just pretending to be confused. At this point, I wasn't sure what was real and what was performance. "All right," he said. I'll run to the store anyway. I might have forgotten something else." He left for 2 hours. 2 hours to buy something we didn't need. When he came back, his phone had no bags with it. No cranberry sauce. No anything. That night, after Sophie had eaten dinner with us and Daniel had driven her back to her apartment, I went into his office. I knew I shouldn't. I knew that going through his things would be a betrayal, even though he was the one who had already betrayed me. But I did it anyway. His desk was very neat. Daniel liked things organized. Everything had a place. His computer was on the desk, closed and dark. His drawers were full of pens and papers and old receipts. I was just about to close the last drawer when I saw it tucked in the very back, underneath some file folders. A phone. A phone that wasn't his regular phone. My hands were shaking as I picked it up. I turned it on and it lit up with a code screen. I tried his birthday. Nothing. I tried my birthday. Nothing. I tried our anniversary. The phone buzzed and the screen went black. I had tried too many times. I put it back exactly where I found it and closed the drawer. I stood very still in his office, listening to the house settle around me, listening to the sound of Daniel moving around upstairs getting ready for bed. A second phone. My husband had a second phone that he was keeping hidden in his office. Over the next few days, I started to see things I should have seen before. Or maybe they were always there and I just didn't want to notice them. When you love someone, sometimes you don't want to see the things that might hurt you. Your brain just decides not to look. Daniel's phone, his regular phone, the one he let me see, was always locked now. He used to leave it on the coffee table while he showered. Now he carried it everywhere, even to the bathroom. I saw him delete messages while he thought I wasn't looking. He would be scrolling through his phone, and then his thumb would move quickly and something would disappear. He stayed up late on his laptop, the screen angled away from me so I couldn't see what he was looking at. He said he was working, but his work was usually done during the day at the office. When I asked him what he was working on, he gave me vague answers that didn't quite add up. He started showering more. He started smelling like a cologne I didn't recognize. He started wearing nicer shirts around the house, shirts that he would normally only wear to the office or out to dinner. The little things. The tiny, terrible things that, when you add them all up, spell out a story you don't want to read. I confided in Maya, my cousin, who had always been my closest friend. She lived across town and worked as a computer analyst, which meant she was very smart with technology. I told her about the second phone. I told her about the strange trips to the store. I told her about Sophie coming to Christmas dinner. Maya listened to me very carefully. When I was done talking, she didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she said, "Come to my place. Bring that second phone if you can. I think I might be able to help you." That night, while Daniel was in the shower, I took the phone from the drawer. My heart was beating so hard I thought surely he must be able to hear it even from upstairs. I slipped it into my purse and told Daniel I was going to visit Maya for a few hours. He barely looked up from his laptop. "Okay, have fun," he said, like I was just going to the grocery store and not carrying evidence of his secret life. At Maya's apartment, she looked at the phone and smiled a sad kind of smile. "Let me work on this," she said. "I might be able to get past the code." It took her 20 minutes. She used something on her computer that I didn't understand. Something technical and complicated. And then suddenly, the screen lit up and we were in. There were messages. So many messages. And photos. And call logs. And they were all to the same person. Sophie. The messages went back months. Months and months of secret communication between my husband and his ex. They weren't just talking. They were planning. They were making arrangements. They were lying together, writing the same lies over and over again in different ways. I sat in Maya's living room and I read my husband's betrayal written out in black and white text on a small screen. I read it all. Every message. Every plan. Every whispered promise that was made to a woman who wasn't me. And somewhere inside me in that moment something changed. The shocked, scared part of me began to harden. It began to transform into something else. Something stronger. Something that knew exactly what needed to happen next. I looked at Maya and I said, "Take screenshots. Of everything. We're going to need them." My cousin nodded, and I saw something like admiration flicker across her face. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I'm going to show him the truth," I said. "I'm going to show him that I know everything. And I'm going to do it in a way that he'll never forget." We spent the rest of the night documenting everything. By the time I left Maya's apartment, we had every piece of evidence we needed. We had the messages, the photos, the dates, the times, the lies. We had proof of everything. I drove home in the darkness, my hands steady on the steering wheel, my mind absolutely clear about what I was going to do. Daniel was already asleep when I got home. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom and looked at him, really looked at him, and I didn't recognize the face on the pillow. The man I thought I was married to didn't exist. He never had. And I was going to make sure that everyone knew it. The next morning, I woke up before Daniel. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table in the darkness, watching the sky slowly turn from black to gray to pale blue. I had barely slept. My mind had been working all night like a computer that couldn't shut down, planning and replanning what I was going to do. Daniel came downstairs around 7. He was still in his pajamas, and he looked tired. I wondered if he had slept better than me, or if guilt had kept him awake too. Not that guilt seemed to be bothering him very much. He smiled at me and kissed the top of my head like he always did, like he was a good husband, like everything was fine. I almost told him right then. I almost threw the screenshots in his face and asked him how he could smile at me after spending months lying to me. But I didn't. I stayed quiet. I was learning that silence was a weapon too. "I'm going to invite my parents for dinner next week," I said instead. "And your parents too. And some friends. I think we should celebrate the new year together. A real celebration." Daniel looked surprised. We usually spent New Year's quietly, just the two of us. "That's a nice idea," he said. "But it's a lot of work." "I can handle it," I said. And I could. Because I was planning something much bigger than a dinner party. Over the next several days, Maya and I worked together like we were solving a puzzle. We printed out every message from the phone. We organized them by date. We made a timeline that showed exactly how long the affair had been going on. It was almost a year. An entire year of lies. The messages showed things I didn't want to know. Things like how Daniel told Sophie that he loved her. How he said our marriage was over. How he was only staying with me because he didn't want to hurt me right now, but eventually he would leave. How Sophie had asked when he was going to tell me, and he said he would figure out the perfect time. The perfect time. There was no perfect time to learn that your husband never loved you, that everything you built together was built on sand. But the thing about reading messages is that they tell you more than just the content. They tell you about patterns. They tell you about habits. They tell you about the rhythm of a relationship. And these messages told me that Sophie had been pulling away from Daniel. She was getting tired of waiting. She was getting angry that he kept promising to leave me and then didn't. In the last few messages, there was tension between them. Sophie was threatening to tell me herself if Daniel wouldn't. Daniel was panicking. He was begging her to be patient. He was making new promises that I could already tell he wouldn't keep. He was going to lose her, Maya said as we sat in her apartment reading through the messages one more time. That's why he agreed to have her at Christmas dinner. He was trying to save the relationship. How do you know that? I asked. Because I read his last message to her, Maya said. He told her that Christmas dinner would be his way of introducing her into his life. He said it was the first step toward everything changing. I felt something twist inside my chest. So this dinner party I was planning, this celebration for the new year with family and friends, it was going to be the perfect stage for what I needed to do. Daniel had created his own trap without even knowing it. I called my parents and asked them to come. I called Daniel's parents. I called our closest friends. Everyone said yes. Everyone was excited about celebrating the new year together. Meanwhile, I went about my normal life. I went to work. I kissed my husband goodbye in the morning. I cooked dinner with him at night. I played the part of the woman who knew nothing. But inside I was building something. I was building a case. I was building a future that didn't include lies. One night, about a week before the dinner party, Daniel and I were watching television together. He was scrolling through his regular phone, probably messaging Sophie on some secret app that deleted the messages automatically. He did that sometimes now. He would get a text, his face would light up with something that wasn't quite happiness but something more urgent, more desperate. Then he would type something out and delete it. "Can I ask you something?" I said. He looked at me, and I saw a flash of fear cross his face. Just for a moment. "Of course," he said. "Are you happy?" I asked. He put his phone down. He turned to look at me, and I watched him carefully construct an answer. I could see him assembling the lie piece by piece, like building blocks. "Of course I'm happy," he said. "Why would you ask that?" "Because you seem distant lately," I said. "Like you're somewhere else even when you're here." "Work has been stressful," he said. "That's all. Nothing to worry about." I nodded and turned back to the television. But I was thinking about all those messages. I was thinking about every lie he had ever told me. And I was thinking about how this was almost over. The day before the New Year's dinner, I did something I had been planning for a long time. I went to a lawyer. I sat in an office with a man named Mr. Harrison who asked me questions about my marriage and my finances and what I wanted out of the divorce. "Yes," I said. "I wanted a divorce." I was absolutely certain. He drew up papers. Official papers. Legal papers that said I was done. That I wanted out. That I was no longer going to live this lie. I paid him and carried those papers home in my purse. They felt heavier than they should have. They felt like they weighed as much as the entire future. That night, I sat at my desk in my room and I wrote letters. One for my parents. One for Daniel's parents. One for our closest friends. I explained everything. I included screenshots from the messages. I explained that I was going to reveal the truth at the dinner party tomorrow, and I wanted them to understand why I was doing it before it happened. I sealed each letter in an envelope and wrote a name on the front. Tomorrow, these envelopes would be placed on the dinner table in front of each guest. I looked at myself in the mirror that night and I barely recognized the woman looking back at me. She looked strong. She looked certain. She looked like someone who had been through fire and was ready to walk through it again if she had to. The next morning, I woke up and it was New Year's Eve. It was the day that my old life was going to end and my new life was going to begin. I could feel it the way you can feel a storm coming. There was electricity in the air. There was a sense of something huge about to happen. I took my time getting ready. I wore a black dress, elegant and simple. I put on makeup carefully. I did my hair. I looked like a woman who was about to take back her power. Daniel came downstairs in a nice shirt and dress pants. He kissed me and said, "You look beautiful." "Thank you," I said. And I meant it. I did look beautiful. I looked like someone who knew exactly who she was and what she wanted. By 7 o'clock, our house was full of people. My parents were there. Daniel's parents were there. Our friends were there. There was food on the table and wine in glasses and a feeling of celebration in the air. But everyone could sense that something was off. They could feel it even if they didn't know what it was. There was a strange energy in the room. It was like everyone was waiting for something without knowing what.
I stood at the head of the table and I looked around at all these people I loved, all these people who had been part of my life, all these people who deserved to know the truth.
"Thank you all for coming," I said, and my voice was very calm and very clear. "Before we celebrate the new year, there's something I need to share with you all. Something that changes everything." I looked at Daniel, and I watched his face go pale. "Before we celebrate the new year, there's something I need to share with you all. Something that changes everything," I said again, and I watched the room shift. People put down their forks. People stopped mid-conversation. Everyone was looking at me now, and I could see it in their eyes. They knew this was not going to be a normal announcement. Daniel stood up. "Alina, what are you doing?" His voice was tight. His hands were shaking. "Good. Please sit down," I said, and my voice was still calm, still strong. "I need to say this." He didn't sit. He remained standing, looking around the room at all the faces, trying to figure out what was happening. His mother was frowning. His father was confused. My parents already knew what was coming because I had called them individually and told them everything. They sat very still, waiting. "For the past year," I began, "my husband has been having an affair with his ex-girlfriend, Sophie. They have been communicating secretly through messages and phone calls. They have been planning for him to leave me. And I have evidence of everything." The room went absolutely silent. The kind of silence that feels like all the air has been sucked out. I could see people processing what I had just said. I could see them trying to understand if they had heard me correctly. Daniel's face turned red. "Alina, this is not the time or the place," he said angrily. "You're being ridiculous." "Sit down," I said, and something in my voice made him actually sit down. Maybe it was because I was no longer the woman he thought I was. Maybe he could sense that I had changed. "I have something for each of you," I said to the table, and I picked up the stack of envelopes that I had prepared. I handed one to my mother, one to my father, one to Daniel's mother and father, one to each of our friends. Last, I handed one to Daniel. His hands were shaking as he took it. "Open them," I said. My mother opened hers first. I watched her read the letter I had written. I watched her face move through shock and sadness and then something like fierce protection. She looked at me and I saw tears in her eyes, but they weren't sad tears. They were angry tears. One by one, everyone opened their envelopes. Inside were the letters I had written explaining what was happening. Inside were screenshots of the messages between Daniel and Sophie. Inside was the evidence of every lie. The room filled with voices. People were talking over each other. Daniel's mother was asking questions. My father was looking at Daniel with disappointment that seemed to crush him more than anger would have. Our friends were reading through the screenshots with growing horror. "This is insane," Daniel said. "Alina is twisting things. She's taking things out of context." "Out of context?" I said. I held up a piece of paper. "Let me read this message. You wrote it to Sophie on December 15th. You said, 'I love you. I don't know how much longer I can pretend with Alina. I want to be with you. I'm going to figure out how to leave her.' Is that out of context, Daniel? Or is that exactly what it looks like?" His face went white. Completely white. Like all the blood had drained out of him. "I have more," I said, and my voice never wavered. I pulled out my phone and I showed them more messages. Messages where he told Sophie things about me that were cruel. Messages where he laughed at me. Messages where he made plans with her that involved him deceiving me. And then I showed them the last piece of evidence. The most important piece. "I also have these," I said, and I placed official-looking papers on the table in front of Daniel. Divorce papers. I filed them 3 days ago. The papers have been served to my lawyer. It's official. We are done. Daniel just stared at the papers. He didn't touch them. He didn't say anything.
You had a choice, I said to him, and now my voice had changed. It was softer, but somehow more powerful.
You could have told me the truth. You could have said that you didn't want to be married anymore. You could have been honest. But instead you lied. You lied to me every single day. You looked me in the eye and you lied. You made promises you never intended to keep.
You built a secret life right next to the life you were living with me.
I turned to look at everyone at the table. I'm telling you this not because I'm angry, though I am angry. I'm telling you this because I refuse to be ashamed of something that is not my fault. My husband chose to lie. My husband chose to cheat. My husband chose to betray me. But I did not choose to stay silent about it.
And I did not choose to pretend that everything was fine when it wasn't.
My mother reached over and squeezed my hand. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. As of tonight, I continued, I am no longer married to Daniel. My lawyer has all the evidence. The divorce will be finalized within the legal time frame. I will be moving forward with my life. And I hope that you will all support me as I do this. Daniel finally spoke. Alina, please. Can we talk about this privately? I think you're making a mistake.
No, I said simply.
I'm not making a mistake.
I'm finally correcting one.
The rest of the evening was strange. People ate and drank but nobody really tasted anything. Conversations happened but they felt hollow. There was no celebration that night.
There was only the weight of truth that had finally been spoken out loud.
Around midnight, my parents left. Daniel's parents left shortly after, his mother hugging me tightly and whispering, "You did the right thing," into my hair. Our friends stayed a bit longer, but eventually they left too. By 1 a.m, it was just me and Daniel in the house. He had been sitting in the living room the whole time, just staring at the divorce papers. I want you to leave, I said to him. Tonight. You can come back tomorrow when I'm not here to get some of your things, but tonight, I want you gone. He looked at me like he didn't recognize me. And maybe he didn't. Maybe he had never really known me at all. He packed a bag without argument. He didn't try to convince me to change my mind. He didn't apologize. He just packed a bag and left. And when he walked out the door, something inside me shifted one final time. The lie was over. The truth was out. And now the real work of healing could finally begin. I stood alone in the middle of my living room, and I realized that for the first time in a very long time I could breathe. The days after Daniel left passed in a strange sort of blur. It wasn't like I was sad all the time. It was more like I existed in two states at once. Part of me was grieving. Part of me was relieved. Part of me was angry. Part of me was peaceful. It was confusing and overwhelming and somehow, strangely, okay. My parents stayed with me for a few days. They helped me reorganize the house, moving Daniel's belongings into boxes in the garage. My mother cleaned out his closet while I sat on the bed and watched her fold his shirts. Those were the shirts he had worn when he went to secret meetings with Sophie. Those were the shirts that had smelled like cologne I didn't recognize. He was always a foolish boy, my mother said, not unkindly. Even when he was younger. He never seemed to understand what he had. I didn't say anything. I just watched her fold. Maya came over and brought champagne, but we didn't drink it that night. We just sat on the couch together and talked. She held my hand and let me cry when I needed to cry. She didn't try to make me feel better. She just sat with me in the sadness and let it be what it was. What happens now? Maya asked me. I don't know, I said. I just know I had to do this. I couldn't keep living a lie. You did the right thing, Maya said. Even though it hurts right now. The lawyer called me a few days later. He said that Daniel had agreed to the terms of the divorce. He wasn't going to fight it. He was giving me the house, most of our savings, and very little else. It was like he understood that he had lost the right to argue about anything. Within a week, the divorce was finalized. It had moved faster than I expected, but I think Daniel was in such shock that he just wanted it to be over. He wanted to stop being the villain in everyone's eyes. He wanted to disappear. 2 weeks after the New Year's dinner, I invited people over again. But this time it was just close friends. We had wine and cheese and we sat in my living room and we talked about the future. My future. Not the future I had been building with Daniel, but the future I was going to build for myself. What do you want to do? My friend Sarah asked.
Like, with your life now?
I had to think about it. It was a good question.
I had spent so much time being married, being devoted to a life with Daniel, that I had almost forgotten what it felt like to think about what I wanted.
I want to travel, I said suddenly, and I meant it. I want to go somewhere I've never been. I want to eat food I've never tried. I want to meet new people. I want to figure out who I am when I'm not defined by being someone's wife. That sounds amazing, Sarah said.
When?
Soon, I said.
As soon as I can.
On the first day of February, I made an appointment with a therapist. I needed to talk to someone who could help me process what had happened. Someone who could help me understand why I had stayed in a marriage with someone who was lying to me. Someone who could help me learn to trust again. Dr. Morrison was a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and an office that smelled like lavender. I told her everything. I told her about the 5 years of marriage. I told her about the affair. I told her about the confrontation. I told her about how much it hurt and how much relief I felt at the same time. Betrayal is complicated, Dr. Morrison said to me during our third session. It doesn't just hurt you. It makes you doubt everything you thought you knew. It makes you question your own judgment. But here's the thing about you, Alina. You didn't stay in denial. You faced the truth head-on. That takes courage. I started to think of that day, the day Daniel told me Sophie was coming to Christmas dinner, as my awakening. It was the day my old life ended and my new life began. Some people might call it the worst day of their life. But I was starting to think of it as the best day of my life. The day everything changed. The day I finally chose myself. By the middle of February, I started making plans. I looked at plane tickets and hotel reviews. I narrowed it down to 3 places: Spain, Italy, Greece. Each one called to me for different reasons. Finally, I chose Greece. I had always wanted to see the blue-domed churches and the whitewashed buildings and the crystal blue water. I booked a trip for April. 2 weeks. By myself. Just me and the freedom I had been denying myself for so long. When I told my parents about the trip, my mother cried. Happy tears this time. This is wonderful, she said. This is exactly what you need. The house felt different now. Lighter somehow. I had removed all of Daniel's things. I had redecorated. I had put new photos on the walls. Photos of me with my family and friends. Photos of travels from before I was married. Photos of my life before Daniel had tried to take it over. In the living room, on the Christmas tree that I had decided to keep up through February, I hung a new ornament. Maya had given it to me as a late Christmas gift. It was a phoenix. A beautiful bird made of red and gold glass, frozen in the moment of rising from flames. Because you're rising, Maya said when she gave it to me. You're rising from the ashes of what he tried to destroy. I looked at that phoenix ornament every day. I looked at it when I was sad. I looked at it when I was angry. I looked at it when I was scared about the future. And it reminded me that I had already survived the fire. I had already come through the flames. And I was still standing. One night in mid-February, I was sitting at my kitchen table working on my laptop when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up.
Alina.
It was Sophie. My husband's ex.
The woman who had been the other point of the triangle.
I didn't hang up. I waited to hear what she had to say. I wanted to apologize, Sophie said, and her voice was small and uncertain. I know that doesn't fix anything. I know it doesn't undo what happened. But I wanted you to know that I'm sorry. For my part in this. For being willing to hurt you. I've been thinking about what you did at that dinner party, how you faced us all with the truth, and I realized I've never been that brave. I've never been willing to stand up and be honest like that.
Why are you calling me?
I asked. Not unkindly, just curious. Because I want you to know that you were right. Everything you did was right. And I think your ex-husband needs to hear that from people. He needs to know that what he did was wrong. And he's not going to learn that from me, but maybe he'll learn it from the consequences he's facing now. After she hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. I felt a lot of things about that phone call. I felt angry that Sophie thought she could apologize and make it better. But I also felt something else. I felt like the universe was confirming what I already knew. I had done the right thing. I had chosen the right path. By the end of February, I had moved through denial and anger and sadness and into something that felt like acceptance. Not acceptance of what Daniel had done. Never that. But acceptance of what had happened and what I was choosing to do with it. I was taking my power back. And nobody was going to convince me to give it away again. April came like a gift. The snow had melted. The world was turning green again. Flowers were blooming everywhere, and I felt like I was blooming too. It had been 4 months since that New Year's Eve dinner when I had exposed all of Daniel's lies. 4 months since my old life had ended and my new life had begun. The morning I left for Greece, I woke up early. The sun was just starting to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. I had my suitcase packed. I had my passport. I had my boarding pass on my phone. I was ready. Before I left, I walked through my house one more time. I walked into the kitchen where Daniel had told me Sophie was coming to Christmas dinner. I looked at the spot on the counter where we had sat with our hot chocolate. That moment felt like it had happened a lifetime ago, even though it had only been a few months. I walked into the living room and I looked at the Christmas tree. Yes, it was still up in April. I hadn't taken it down. The phoenix ornament was still there, glowing in the morning light. I stood in front of it and I made a promise to myself. This is for me, I said out loud. This year, this life, this journey. This is all for me. The flight to Greece was long, but I didn't mind. I watched movies and read books and ate the airplane food without thinking about calories or what Daniel would have wanted. I made decisions based entirely on what I wanted. It was a strange and wonderful feeling. When I arrived in Athens, I took a taxi to my hotel. The driver spoke in rapid Greek and I understood none of it, but somehow we managed to communicate. He dropped me off at a small hotel in a quiet neighborhood, and I checked in and climbed the narrow stairs to my room. The room was small but beautiful. There was a window that looked out onto a narrow street where locals were walking and talking and living their lives. I opened the window and breathed in the smell of jasmine and olive trees and something else I couldn't name. It smelled like freedom. I spent the first 3 days just walking. I walked through neighborhoods I had never heard of. I ate food at small restaurants where no one spoke English and I had to point at pictures to order. I got lost and didn't care. I sat in cafes and drank coffee and watched people go by. I took pictures of everything. Not to show other people but just to remember. To have proof that I was living. On the 4th day, I took a ferry to an island. The water was so blue it didn't seem real. The sky was so clear it seemed like I could see forever. The people on the ferry were locals and tourists mixed together, all of us seeking something. I wondered what they were seeking. I wondered if any of them were running from anything, or if they were all running toward something. The island was small and quiet. There were white buildings with blue doors and blue windows. There were cats sleeping in the sun everywhere. There were old women sitting on their porches. There were gardens overflowing with flowers. I found a small house on the edge of the island that rented rooms. I rented one for a week. It had a view of the ocean. It had a balcony where I could sit and think. It had everything I needed. Every morning, I woke up and I wrote in my journal. I wrote about my marriage. I wrote about the affair. I wrote about the confrontation. I wrote about how much it had hurt and how much it had freed me. I wrote about who I was becoming. I met people on that island. A woman named Dimitria who was 70 years old and had lived there her whole life. She told me stories about love and loss and how you have to choose yourself sometimes. A young couple on their honeymoon who asked me to take their picture. I took 12 pictures and they were so happy. I went swimming in the ocean. The water was so cold it took my breath away. But I swam anyway. I swam out past the other swimmers, out into the blue nothingness, and I felt like I was swimming away from my old self. I felt like I was becoming someone new. One afternoon, I sat on my balcony and I called my parents. I told them about the island. I told them about the food I had eaten. I told them about the people I had met. My mother cried. "You sound different," she said. "You sound happy." "I am happy," I said. And it was true. Not happy in the way I thought happiness was supposed to feel. But genuine happiness. The kind that comes from inside, from knowing that you are exactly where you are supposed to be. On my last night on the island, I sat on the beach and I watched the sun set. The sky turned every color I had ever seen and colors I didn't have names for. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever witnessed. I thought about that moment 4 months ago when Daniel had said Sophie was coming to Christmas dinner. I thought about how terrified I had been. I thought about how broken I had felt. I thought about how I had wanted to disappear. But I hadn't disappeared. I had done the opposite. I had become more visible. I had claimed my truth. I had refused to hide. When I got back home, my house felt different. It wasn't the same place I had left. Or maybe I was different and the house was just reflecting who I had become. Either way, it felt like home now in a way it never had before. It felt like a place I was choosing to be, not a place I had to be. I hung a new photo on my refrigerator. It was a picture of me on that Greek island, sitting on the beach with the sunset behind me. I was smiling. Not a fake smile. A real smile. The smile of someone who had survived something hard and come out the other side stronger. I thought about the phoenix ornament on the Christmas tree. It was still there, still glowing in the corner of the living room. But now I understood that the phoenix wasn't just a symbol of rising from the ashes. It was a symbol of transformation. It was a symbol of becoming. I had been transformed by betrayal and by my response to that betrayal. I had been transformed by choosing truth over comfort. I had been transformed by refusing to be a victim. And now, as I stood in my house on that spring evening, I realized that I was finally ready for whatever came next. I was ready to love again, when I found the right person. I was ready to trust again, carefully and wisely. I was ready to live my life on my own terms. I picked up my phone and I texted Maya. I sent her a picture of the sunset from Greece and I wrote, "Thank you for believing in me. For helping me find the truth. For being by my side when everything fell apart. You were right. I did rise. I'm still rising." Maya texted back immediately, "You always had the strength. I just helped you see it. I'm so proud of you, cousin." That night, I made myself dinner. I didn't wait for anyone else. I didn't cook what someone else wanted. I cooked what I wanted. And as I ate, I thought about how this simple act of cooking for myself and eating alone and being completely content with that, was proof of how far I had come. The woman who had been devastated by her husband's betrayal, had transformed into a woman who loved herself. The woman who had been defined by her marriage had become defined by her own choices. The woman who had been broken had become unbreakable. And somewhere in the living room, the phoenix ornament sat on the Christmas tree, glowing softly in the darkness, a permanent reminder of the day everything changed and I finally became free. Thank you so much for following Alina's incredible journey from heartbreak to healing with me on Voices of Auntie Belle. Her story is a testament to the power of truth and the strength we all carry inside ourselves. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of your own strength or someone you know who needed to hear it, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear that they too can rise from their ashes. Subscribe to Voices of Auntie Belle so you never miss another story that might change your life. And please, tell me in the comments where you are watching from. I absolutely love hearing from our community all around the world. Your stories matter. Your voice matters. And you matter. We'll see you in the next one.